France 24 debate. We're hearing from voices from the Syrian opposition, some of whom met with the French foreign minister here in Paris on Tuesday, with us to talk about the situation inside that country. Haitham Maleh, welcome back. Welcome as well to Bassam Hissak. Samir Aita of the Arabic language edition of Le Monde, also involved in the Syrian opposition, and Joshua Landis of SyriaComment.com is joining us from the University of Oklahoma. The New York Times wrote in an article this week, and just before the break, Bassam Hissak was mentioning on those who march in the street and those who don't. The New York Times wrote an article this week on how the economy in Syria has ground to a halt since March, with diplomats seeing signs that businessmen are no longer sitting the fence. American and Turkish officials, they say, believe that the merchant elite in both Damascus and Aleppo will eventually turn against Mr. Assad. Joshua Landis, is that wishful thinking on the part of those diplomats, or are there actual tangible signs of that?
Well, I think there are plenty of people who are against Assad in their hearts. But what do you do? The problem is if they want to import and export, they cannot be funding the opposition. Or they will have, they'll go to jail if they're discovered to do that. What do you want a businessman to do? Bassam left the country because he was worried about going to jail. Now, that's the choice that the businessmen have to a certain extent. They can leave the country, and many of them perhaps are making arrangements to do that. And that's what Syrians have traditionally done. They've left Syria, and there are thousands of Syrians living outside the country. The problem for any businessman who's trying to keep his business open is, how do you keep your business open, keep your employees employed, and work against the government, which is very powerful? Most businessmen are keeping their head down. And that's that's going to be a trouble. Now, most Alawites, who are 12% of the country, have no other employer than the state. I mean, almost every Alawite family has at least one person that's employed in the military or in a state office someplace. They have nobody else to employ them. They have no choice but to continue. And of course, culturally and politically, they're going to support this government. They're well-trained. They're a military. The military has stood fairly solid. There have been a number of defections, but nothing of major importance yet. And this is going to be an extremely long and difficult struggle. Christians are sitting on the fence. They're watching what's happening in Egypt, the Copts and others, and they watch what happened in Iraq. And they don't want to risk the possibility that Muslim Brothers would come to power and bad things would happen to minorities. There is, still an important minority in Syria that are not willing, that are supporting the state. There's another silent majority, which are these businessmen and others, who may, in their heart of hearts, want a democracy. But they don't know what to do in order to push it forward. And they're going to sit on their hands, and they're going to watch events unfold. So I understand that there's momentum for the opposition. Things are deteriorating. The economy is going to get a lot worse. But in terms of how the regime is going to be pushed aside, or how the military is going to be destroyed by this public sentiment, is not yet obvious, I think, to anybody. And this is where it becomes so important that the opposition begins to come up with a plan. And so far, we're just beginning to see some leadership in the opposition, but we don't have a plan. We don't have an outward statement. And because there's still big differences between the Muslim Brothers, the more seculars, the Christians like Michel Kilo and others who haven't really come to an agreement and laid out a plan that Syrians, particularly those who are sitting on their hands, can embrace and say, this is the kind of Syria I want to move towards.
Haitham Maleh, what kind of message can federate a country that, again, has such a huge mosaic of different kinds of people that, as Joshua has just spelled out? What's the message that will really federate the opposition?
This is a historical story. I was reading in memory of Dr. Marouf Dawalibi. I don't know if you know him or not.
I do not.
You do not. He was my teacher. He was my teacher. He was Prime Minister of Syria several times. Yeah. Not Islamist, not is from Al-Sha'ab party, not from Islamist. But his background, another thing. He's a Muslim person. But, yeah. But in he wrote in his book that through the negotiation between Syria side and French side in 1936, two writers in France were writing articles, letters to French government. Please do not go out, do not leave Syria because Christian, Alawis, Druze will be dangerous. Every time, myself, I'm receiving diplomatic from inside, from outside, since more than 15 years in my office. Always the same story.
Protect
repeated.
The minorities.
Always what happened, Muslim Brotherhood, Christian, I don't understand it. Even in ourselves, we do not believe in this story in Syria as Syrian people. I want to give you a small example. Through the democracy regime, Faris al-Khouri is Christian, is not from Catholic, from few person, maybe 2% of Syrian people. He was prime minister in Syria, and he was a minister of Al-Awqaf Islamiyya, Islamic mosques, and sometimes, some days, he was president.
Right,
no one say why he is Christian.
But Bassam Ishaq, it's true that there are genuine worries among the Christian community, and it's true that the Christian community has stood on the sidelines, as Joshua Landis said, to a large degree, because of those fears.
Well, minorities everywhere, usually with most minorities, the main issue, the major issue for them is security, their own security. So that's natural for the Christians in Syria to be worried, Also, they look back at what happened in Iraq and they're worried. Historically, 1915 is a memory in every Christian's mind in Syria. But we have to know that Syrians survived and lived and did very well and strived. And as Mr. Maleh said, they reached the highest offices in the country before the Ba'ath were in power. Actually, the highest rate of immigration of Christians in Syria occurred during the Ba'ath regime. So the Ba'ath regime has really hurt the Christians in that way. They have been hurt like every other Syrians economically. They have lost real influence.
This is linked to a specific problem in Jazeera area, where you have the Syriac and etc. But not only the Christian left. The Christian left outside because they have means to live outside. But 40% of the population of the Jazeera, which is really the place where all products are out, have left this area.
But they left
is a social problem.
Many of them left because they lost their jobs.
Yeah, like the Muslims.
Yes, but he's asking me about the Christians, and I'm trying to address the Christian question.
All right, let's bring up another point, which Joshua Landis touched on. Libya has Benghazi. There's no opposition stronghold defended by NATO planes inside of Syria, and there won't be one, it seems. But, and your visit's proof of that, there is the support of London and Paris for meeting with and giving at least moral backing to this Syrian National Council, just formed 10 days ago in Istanbul, headed by a professor at the Sorbonne University, Burhan Ghalion.
I'm here on Mr. Ghalion's request to express the support of France for the Syrian people, forgive my slip, which you might understand. The Syrian people who are trying to fight for their freedom and their fundamental rights, fighting with their bare hands, fighting in a peaceful manner.
Samir Aita, what's your reaction to Alain Juppé, this foreign minister?
Besides making the joke on the mismanagement of
Freudian
words.
slip there.
Yes, on Libyan, Syrian, and etc. And that Mr. Ghalion is not the president of CNC because the meeting in Istanbul has not nominated the president, if I'm not wrong. But anyhow, I want to answer Joshua Landis' questions. There are two important things to think about. First, is there a necessity to unify all political opposition to make the regime toppling? This is a matter which is very discussable. I think, for example, I like Mr. Maleh. I saw him very much on TV. I think he is very good as a politician, and he can ally to his line a lot of people. I don't understand why he wants to be united with the, and how he is disappointed that he was not invited to the SNC. I think he has to bring up a strong political movement of his tendency. The national coordination is building up,
All right, without going specifically too much into the detail of it, let's not...
The problem with the SNC is there is two things. If it is a forum for dialogue between the different people interested in wanting to topple the regime, because everybody agrees on the toppling of the regime. There is no difference on this issue between the things. The differences are on the issue of treatment of co-officialism, on the image of Syria tomorrow. Just let me finish this, and please, and on the political program. The coordination has made a program for a constitution where there is nothing about the image of Syria tomorrow, which has been out of the SNC. And this is a problem to bring other categories of the population to the toppling of the regime. The second issue is how exactly to topple the regime. And there are two things. If the SNC takes the sovereignty of the Syrian state, this means Libya. Means having a forum to unify all oppositions is excellent thing. And all Burhan is my friend, Basma Kodmani is my friend, and etc. And we discuss. But what we say to them, you cannot replace the Syrian state. You can fight to help the uprising, to support it, to represent it politically, but you cannot do like what the National Council in Libya has done, because this means, in parallel, the militarization of the uprising and then civil war. We want a message which leads to the Tunisian and Egyptian solution with the political program, which means putting the army saying at one point, like in 1953, because you talked about history, the army saying to the president, to his family, please go out.
When the National Council was formed, we had a discussion, and one of our France 24 observers spoke to a member of one of the local opposition councils, and who told us that, well, it all seemed a bit abstract, the meeting in Istanbul. So there's the fact that those that are doing the coalescing are abroad. And also, question for you is, in this room, let's face it, guys, none of us are under 40. And the under 40 generation, do they see this need?
In spirit, he's under 40.
Do they see the need for to have a leader and to have an organized structure at this point?
Yes, you know, we have to take into account the 40 years of oppression that...
50.
Yes, 50 years of no political life. I mean, to be an opposition figure in Syria in the last 48 years, to be exact, is to either go to jail or to immigrate. You know, so or to die. So we have not had the chance, you know, to mingle among each other and speak and dialogue. This is what is happening. It is not a perfect situation. Your observations are in their place, you know, about the meeting that happened in Istanbul. But I think, and I hope, and we will work at making things better. Things need to get better.
And let me ask you just also very briefly, because we're running short on time, who's sponsoring all of this in terms of, let's see, there's a meeting in Istanbul, so obviously Turkey was there for that. We've heard word that you know, there's France, there's Britain, there's the United States, there's Qatar. Everybody wants to be the sponsor, it seems, of the Syrian opposition to a degree. Who for
the Syrian National Council?
Or what are your thoughts on this when you hear these?
I don't agree with that. You know, I don't get that impression myself. I think many people, the countries you've mentioned, are countries that uphold and respect, you know, values of individual liberty, values related to human rights. So naturally, I think these countries will reach out and will want to support such council.
Joshua Landis, are diplomats scrambling to pick the winning horse?
Well, certainly there's a lot of pressure, I think, from the West, and Secretary of State Clinton has mentioned this in her recent talks, to try to get a unified leadership out of the opposition so that they can begin to have a dialogue with the opposition. We saw that the second announcement of the National Council in Istanbul was not greeted happily in Washington because Washington felt that there were too many Muslim Brothers on the council. And then they redid it and diminished the number of Muslim Brotherhood participants and put Burhan Ghaliun as a spokesperson, who is a well-known secular advocate. And this had much greater resonance. And so there is a dialogue. There is a negotiation, an implicit negotiation that's going on between Western governments who are looking for the type of people that they can back up and they can sell to their Congresses and to their backers and say, these are the people we want in power in Syria. And so there is, there is this, it's a three-ring circus. There's a delicate balancing act. And as Bassam mentioned, the opposition hasn't spoken together for 50 years. They don't even know who each other are. They're beginning to discover each other and discover each other's sentiments. What do the Kurds want? What do the Muslim Brotherhood want? What do the seculars want? And people are beginning to map out this new world of politics in Syria. And it's going to take a long time. And there isn't a strong tradition of unity amongst not even the Sunnis, not to mention all of the Syrians, because the reason that there was dictatorship and military coups in the 1950s was because the political parties of the time could not work together. And the president in 1949 brought the military onto the streets and declared emergency rule in 49 and led to the first military takeover because he refused to make a national government of national unity with the Aleppans, so the People's Party. And this is...
Haitham Maleh, I'm sorry, but we're almost out of time. Haitham Maleh, one final question. Is there any negotiation possible with the Assad regime?
The regime? It's impossible.
Impossible.
Impossible, because this regime is killer. They make a war against the people, his people, by 3 tanks of army, by airplane, air force, helicopter, by ships from the sea. More than 5,000 killed till now. More than 100,000 in jails. So what we can do? Myself, I started negotiate with the president himself, with Bashar Assad himself, when he became as president after 5 months till now, 8 letters, personally or by media. I met the most important persons in the regime. Nothing happened. They don't want. They have no plan for future.
We're going to
it's impossible.
Continue to follow this story very closely on France 24, and I want to thank you, Haitham Maleh. I want to thank Bassam Hissak, Samir Aita, and Joshua Landis for joining us here in the France 24 debate. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. Coming up next, Business with Marcus Carlson.